All right, I think we've got everyone here. My name is Amanda Rint. I am the marketing manager at Data Link Networks. Thanks so much for joining us today. We have an exciting session covering Barracuda Managed XDR. Before I pass it over to our main speaker, I'm going to go over some housekeeping items. Today's session will be recorded and everyone will receive a copy with your follow-up emails along with some resources we will be sharing. Please stay towards the end. We have some free stuff to give away to our attendees. We also strongly encourage audience participation, so please feel free to drop any questions that come up in our Q&A box, and we will address those at the end. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Benny Buljko from Barracuda, and he's going to kick us off.
Perfect. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
So, who am I? My name is Benny Buljko. I am a senior solutions architect here at Barracuda Networks. I've been in the IT industry for about 15 years or so. I worked in many verticals, many different industries across the United States. Today, I specifically help my team at Barracuda and all of our partners with our Managed XDR platform. Now, I'd be a bad host if I didn't mention our partner here today, and that is Data Link Networks. We at Barracuda partner with Data Link out in Southern California. Just a little bit about Data Link, they're a managed service provider, a national managed service provider and IT solutions provider. They first began business back in 1988 in their headquarters in Southern California. Today, they actually have an additional office opened up in Arkansas. And as you can see, Data Link is a great partner of ours, and they also partner with other great organizations such as Microsoft, Dell, Lenovo, so on and so forth. And you can see kind of the different areas Data Link specializes in with managed services, cybersecurity, cloud protection, hardware procurement, networking, and of course, data centers. So talking a little bit about who is Barracuda. So to piggyback off of that slide, our motto is we are here to protect and support our customers for life. What we do is we deliver innovative security products that are easy to buy, deploy, and use. Now, we partner with organizations like Data Link to provide these sort of solutions. That is email protection, managed XDR, network protection, data protection, application protection, and of course, a security-centric RMM. Over the last 20 years that Barracuda has been in business, we've acquired many different accolades. Now, what I'm showing you here are just the recent ones we've won in 2024. Just to name a few, top security leader, best in show, market leader, best cybersecurity offering, and email security platform of the year. So we're no stranger to the industry. We've been around for quite a long time. So aside from us, what we're here to do today is talk about the growing concern about cybersecurity and the overall trends that we're seeing. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. So these are just some recent metrics I pulled off of some statistical website, and basically what we're seeing here is that 36% of organizations have suffered a security breach in 2024. Now, these are organizations that would be willing to admit to security breaches, right? Many organizations wouldn't admit to that to ruin their reputation. But 27% of victims of ransomware and extortion, 27% of organizations were victims of ransomware and extortion. What we're also seeing is that almost every single time ransomware is found, we also see double extortion, which means these attackers are trying to pull and squeeze more money out of you. So 93% of the time, that's the case. 64% of the time, or I should say 64% of cyber claims for small to medium enterprises were a result of ransomware. So that is showing you how ransomware is really becoming prevalent in the industry. And then 98% of all cyber claims, this is a shocking statistic in my opinion, 98% of all cyber claims were for small to medium enterprise businesses. Now let's take a look at some of the trends that we're seeing. So number one, we have AI generated attacks. Hackers are now using AI and different forms of AI to make their attacks more complex and also harder to identify to the non-technical person. Number two, ransomware as a service. So you don't have to learn or know how ransomware is built, how to execute it, how to target someone. You simply just pay a hacker, and that ransomware as a service will basically do the rest for you. Increased phishing attacks. Number three, this is just going to increase exponentially. I think with this new technology coming out like generative AI, ChatGPT, right, there is a skyrocket of phishing incidents. Number four, double or triple extortion. Now, if you're a victim of ransomware, the norm for the attacker is to now double or triple extort you, really until your business is bone dry, until you have no more funding. Number five, increased cyber insurance requirements. So insurance providers are catching on to these trends. They're now forcing organizations to adhere to these certain technologies and standards to better protect your business. But realistically, it's to decrease the likelihood of their payout to you in the event of these incidents. Number six, increased industry compliance. So we're seeing a lot of different verticals implementing different compliance standards and requiring these organizations to adhere to some of these standards, such as PCI, GLBA, NIST, CMMC, HIPAA. I mean, you name it. There's so many acronyms out there and different compliance standards. So this is really becoming the norm, and this is really where we're trending towards. Now, let's take a look at some of the volume of attacks and where these attacks are coming from, who are they attacking, and you can see here very quickly that the United States is the #1 targeted country for cyber attacks, not just regionally, but also worldwide, with a total amount of over 620 million attacks in 2024. So you can see also Israel comes in a close second, trailing right behind the US, and then there's kind of a big drop off. On the right, you can see which countries are targeted most per region. You see United States for the Americas. We see in the Middle East, North Africa is Israel. Europe and Central Asia is Ukraine, probably due to that Ukraine-Russia conflict. And then South Asia, East Asia, Pacific, Taiwan, and then the Sub-Saharan Africa region, and that is going to be South Africa. Now, another interesting statistic I'd like to share with you is the most targeted sectors, right? Which industries are being targeted the most? And you could see almost a quarter of the attacks are in the IT industry. Could be developers, could be anything IT or sort of technology related. And then we also see education and research as another huge target for these attackers. And then followed by that, we have government and then sort of a distribution among all the other verticals. So what we're also seeing is that there is a global talent shortage, and this makes it extremely difficult to fight against these complex threats because realistically, there's more jobs open than people can fill them, right? We don't have enough people out there. We don't have enough cybersecurity professionals, not just in the US, but really worldwide. Speaking to the North America region, there's over 500,000 open cybersecurity jobs. And when we kind of add all this up, all these regions, that amounts to about 5 million open jobs worldwide. I mean, to me, that's a little crazy to think about. But let's hone in on California specifically. So what we see is that cybersecurity talent is extremely difficult to hire because, again, there's not a lot of talent out there. There's more open jobs than there are talent. And then retaining that talent, making sure that they're not getting scooped up by all these big name corporations, that's also seemed to be a difficulty. So what we're seeing in California alone is that there's almost 40,000 open jobs in the cyber industry. And this was recorded in 2023. What we also saw is that there was $2.1 billion lost due to cyber attacks in 2023. These numbers are probably going to increase once we get the results for 2024. And 2.1 billion is not a little bit of money. That's quite a bit of money and could be used for definitely infrastructure advancements in California. But let's take a look at also some salary averages, right? Just to put it in perspective, the national average for a senior cybersecurity engineer, which is what you would get with a team like Datalink, is $166,000 per year. Now, of course, with California's cost of living being a little bit higher, it's also expected that the salaries are going to be a little bit higher. So the average salary for such a position in San Francisco, you can see, is $267,000 per year. And then when we come down south to Los Angeles, San Diego, both at $208,000 per year. And these metrics were taken from Glassdoor.com, so these are pretty accurate. And these are not low salaries, right? The difficult part, again, is really finding that good talent and retaining that good talent. And back to what I mentioned earlier with Datalink, this is why we recommend partnering with an organization like Datalink, because they're able to provide a library of these talented engineers and IT professionals that can kind of bolt onto your existing business and assist with all your sort of IT and cyber needs without going through that cumbersome hiring process and learning process and onboarding process, and of course retaining that talent, of course, like I said. So let's take a look at what is causing business leaders to be so concerned with these sort of cyber attacks. The common concerns that we see is that there's, again, limited to no cybersecurity expertise. This is exactly what I was alluding to on the previous two slides. But also, business leaders are concerned about downtime and reputational damage. If an organization maybe you do business with today was hit with a large breach, you might want to think twice about doing business with that organization again. And that's really what I'm alluding to with that reputational damage. But what we're also seeing is that there's a huge gap in centralized security data and visibility. There's too many siloed products, too many dashboards, too many logins. There's just too much stuff scattered all over the place. What you really want is a centralized dashboard for all your security data, so it makes it that much easier to understand exactly what's happening. Another common theme is alert fatigue. So maybe let's say you do have some cybersecurity talent hired, but you find yourself along with that cybersecurity talent, you don't have the systems or technology or software in place to provide you quality data. Quality data is extremely important, and because of this, there may be a lot of false positives if you don't have that quality data or those systems in place, or maybe simply just alert fatigue. Seeing so many alerts, you begin to think, okay, that's not a legitimate alert, or I've seen that before, that's nothing, you don't have to worry about that. And then the one time you put that off and you sort of overlook one of those alerts, it is actually a legitimate threat. So alert fatigue is a real thing. And then lastly, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but regulatory and compliance standards are increasing. We're seeing this with insurance companies. We're seeing this with industry compliance standards. We're seeing this almost everywhere. So I want to kind of shift gears here, and I want to talk a little bit about AI, because AI is really taking the industry by storm. It's really a game changer, and it's changing the way cyber attacks are created by enabling attackers to automate tasks, generate high targeted and adaptive attacks, and bypass traditional defenses, and ultimately to exploit vulnerabilities with much greater speed and precision. And some of the things we're seeing is that, like I said, there's an increased volume. And that's simply due to automation. AI can automate things. It can send out thousands and thousands of phishing emails, for example, in a matter of seconds. Targeting is becoming easier. Now we can use AI to find who should I target, which C-suite executives, who was just recently hired, and then simplified customization and personalization. So now we can tailor the emails, phishing attacks, or any of these attacks to tailor to a certain person, tailor to a certain industry, making it that much more compelling and less obvious that it's an attack. And then code generation to exploit vulnerabilities. Now these attackers are using AI to find exploits in code, in software, to now open these zero-day vulnerabilities to now get to your data that much quicker. Now, there's one sort of AI-powered threat I'd like to focus on here, and just as an example, and that is called Black Mamba. Black Mamba, like I said, is an AI-generated malware. It is polymorphic in nature, so dynamically generates malicious code using natural language process to evade detection by traditional security systems. It leverages its adaptability to bypass defenses, posing a significant threat to organizational and personal cybersecurity. So, in a nutshell, some bullet points I've listed here of sort of characteristics of this Black Mamba malware is that number one, it lowers the barrier of entry. Now you can simply go to a generative AI tool used for attackers, which is definitely out there on the internet, and ask it to create something like a Black Mamba. That means you don't need to know the coding, you don't need to know the technology, you just add a simple input, and the output comes this malicious software. Automated evasive behavior. Automated evasive behavior. This is a critical one because it is now built in such a way that it can evade traditional antivirus and traditional endpoint protection. It is polymorphic in nature, which means it blends in using machine learning capabilities. So it can blend in with certain tasks, certain processes on your computer so that people can't recognize it. People can't, or technology can't see it as a potential threat. So it changes over time. Command and control communication. So of course it needs to beacon out to a command and control server to exfiltrate data or take commands on what to do next. And that is a very common thing for this type of malware. And then of course, I mentioned this just now, but exfiltration of data. One of the core features of this Black Mamba software is it's designed to find most important information on that computer, on that server, wherever it resides, take that data, exfiltrate it, steal it, of course, and then the attacker is going to either leverage that data or sell it on the dark web. So the question is, how do we fight against these complex threats? And I always like to go back to the basics in terms of what needs to be done here. And that is the essential cybersecurity steps, or essential cybersecurity hygiene steps, I should say. So number one, you need to identify what needs to be protected. And so this is simple, right? Understand which data is most important to you. Is it HIPAA data? Is it PII data? Is it intellectual property? What is it, right? And I think a lot of organizations have a good grasp on what data is important to them. Number two, protect that data, of course, but not just with one layer of defense, but with multiple layers of defense. Simply having endpoint protection or some antivirus solution, that's not enough. Simply having just a spam filter, that's not enough. Just a firewall, that's not enough either. So that's kind of the trend that was normal maybe 10, 15 years ago, is to have endpoint protection, email protection, firewall. There needs to be more, right? We need to be able to detect this anomalous behavior by monitoring your environment. And that brings me to number three. The only way we can detect and understand what's happening in your environment is if we have a monitoring solution deployed in your environment to understand exactly what is occurring, what changes are occurring, who's doing what, where are people signing in from, and really seeing what the organization is doing at a granular level. Ultimately, having number three in place brings us to number four. And having a monitoring solution in place reduces the response time. Seeing exactly what is occurring in almost real time leads us into jumping on that sort of that threat, that activity, and quarantining it, or locking an account out, and just being that much quicker to respond to the threat. Time is money, right? So the longer it takes for you to respond to a threat, the more likely your organization will be breached and more damage will be done. So number five is improve your recovery capabilities. So of course, backups are extremely important. A lot of organizations may have backups, and that's absolutely great. I encourage backups. But the question is how often do you test your backups, right? How often have you actually gone through a disaster recovery drill or session to test that you know exactly, you and your team know exactly what to do in the event of a disaster? That disaster could be like something that's recently occurred in California, like the fires, could be a flood, could be a cyber incident, could be wherever. And so being prepared for those incidents is extremely important. It's not, I would never want to try and test my backup solution in the event of an actual incident. I want to be thorough with my testing. I want to confirm it works, and I want to know and have that peace of mind that if a disaster comes, I know things are going to work. I know I have a game plan, and all my team knows exactly what to do. So these are the essential steps that I always like to refer to. Now I want to turn to sort of the traditional approach. And the traditional approach is, like I said earlier, understanding what needs to be protected, right? What data, and that is the identify section. And a lot of people have that. A lot of organizations know that, and protect that data. A lot of organizations do protect that data. They have endpoint protection, like I said, they have firewalls, they have spam filters, they patch their appliances, they update their Windows systems, and they also have backups. And that's great. That is a really good starting point. But where we see a really giant gap is the detect and respond piece. That's where that cyber gap is, because typically organizations do not have a monitoring service in place. Not having that monitoring service in place lowers the time it takes, or heightens, I should say, the time it takes to identify these threats. And so with the Barracuda approach is we fill in those gaps, and those gaps can be filled with our managed XDR solution. And what we can do is we can provide that continuous monitoring and also threat hunting. This is being proactive as opposed to reactive. And using our managed XDR solution, we can respond to these incidents, whether it be a manual intervention, whether it be an automatic intervention, whether we need to engage our team at data link. So what is managed XDR? So managed XDR is, in simple terms, an incident detection and response solution that integrates with multiple security products into a unified platform. And this is backed by a 24/7, 365 Security Operations Center, or SOC. And essentially what we do is we collect and correlate data from various security layers. So we're collecting data from endpoints, from servers, from network technologies, from email protection providers, and cloud services. So what we're doing is really bringing that holistic view of your organization's technology within all of these different categories. And some of the key benefits of using a solution like Managed XDR is it's 24/7, 365. This solution does not sleep. We're constantly monitoring your business and all of the technology within your business to look for that anomalous behavior. Automation AI, we're going to talk a little bit about automation AI a little bit later, but automation AI is modern. Automation AI is the future. If you are not using automation AI, you are behind the curve. Centralized security data. As I kind of alluded to in the previous slides, it's no longer having all your data scattered and siloed into these different dashboards and different websites. It is now centralized in a single pane of glass. Proactive threat hunting. Now, this is no longer a reactive solution, right? Think of endpoint protection. Endpoint protection is reactive. When when the endpoint protection identifies something as a potential threat on the endpoint, it reacts to it. And by that, I mean it'll quarantine the threat, it'll block the threat, whatever it is. It is reactive. Now, what is a game changer is now we are proactive. We're pushing that proactive agenda, and that is to proactively look at every single person's machine, server, network to understand if there are things leading up to an attack, right? Maybe an attacker didn't execute anything, but they're preparing for that execution process. So our goal is to identify these threats well before the execution process, and that is to make the eradication process that much easier. Vendor agnostic. What's great is that we are vendor agnostic and we work with a lot of different technologies. So if you don't have Barracuda today, that's totally fine. We can work with Cisco, Palo Alto, we can work with CrowdStrike, we can work with so many different technologies out there. So we are considered an open XDR solution and work with various different technologies and vendors. Predictable cost model. What's great for our customers is that there's no gotchas at the end of the month. The cost that you sign up for, that's going to be your cost. So that's not really going to fluctuate or change. Of course, as your business grows, it might change, but relatively speaking, it's a set price every month that you can predict and know exactly what you're paying for. Customizable executive reports. So this is something that the team at Datalink can provide you and give you kind of a breakdown of exactly what's happening in your environment from a security perspective. They do an amazing job in holding these security QBRs or quarterly business reviews with their customers. So what they love to do is have a sit down with you and kind of go over your security environment, talk about the potential threats that have been seen, or maybe potential changes in your environment to sort of lock down your organization a little bit further, or just any sort of changes that might improve your overall cyber posture. And there's much more that you can gain with our Managed XDR, but those are just some key things I like to highlight. So how does our Managed XDR work? Well, let's talk a little bit about the workflow. So the first thing that's going to happen is that we're going to pull log data from different technologies. Those technologies can be firewalls, can be endpoint protection, can be your Microsoft 365, and we do that in a number of different ways. We can pull it via an API connection, via forwarding to a TCP endpoint, and essentially the goal is to take that data and put it into our XDR platform for analysis. Now, during number 2 in this process, that's the XDR analysis process, this is where all the data flows into a fully managed SIEM solution. SIEM stands for Security, Information, and Event Management, is the tool we use to collect massive amounts of data and sift through that data at a very fast rate. We also use automation, and SOAR. Automation is what we use. SOAR stands for Security, Orchestration, Automation, and Response. And using SOAR, we're able to automate a lot of tasks, and we're able to be that much more effective and efficient to find these threats that much faster. And during our analysis process, we're also leveraging our threat intelligence. For reference, our threat intelligence has over 11 billion indicators of compromise. You can think of that as like a dictionary of 11 billion definitions that we could reference to help us understand a threat. And so we're going to use that during our analysis process. We have one of the biggest threat intelligence feeds from a vendor standpoint. And of course, again, we're going to use that to our advantage. Next is number 3, the alarm analysis piece. This is where the human element gets introduced. Our security operations center now gets introduced in this process, and they're verifying if things are legitimate, or maybe they need to dive in a little bit deeper into an alert to understand if it is a true positive, or maybe to what extent is this attack, right? Maybe the attack started via email, but maybe it branched out to some endpoints. And that's really the job of the SOC team, is to see at what extent is this attack occurring. And then finally, number 4, the alert process. In this process, this is where we alert the appropriate personnel, whether it's someone in your organization, whether it's the team at Data Link Networks. But we work very closely with the team at Data Link Networks to ensure a swift response, whether that be through us, whether that be through them. We can respond automatically to threats. It really just depends on what works best for you. And in terms of this solution, we're very flexible. So we will work with you and we will work for you. So there's a lot of flexibility in sort of how this process works. But all of this is monitored and maintained 24/7, 365 by our Global Security Operations Center. And speaking of our Global Security Operations Center, this is how our Operations Center is sort of structured. As you can see, we have different teams offering sort of different layers of protection, if you will. We're starting with the blue team at the base there. Blue team is the first line of defense, and they are level 1 and level 2. They're the defensive security. They're responding immediately to threats. They're the first ones at the scene of the crime, so to speak. Then we have the green team. So our solution also has a managed endpoint protection offering, where we have a team of security professionals manage your endpoint protection 24/7, 365. So we have a very robust, very large team of endpoint engineers to do that for us. Next, we have the purple team. So as you can see, we have a lot of automation. I mentioned the buzzword automation many, many times, but the purple team there is really to enhance our automation. It is, the question is no longer how much can you see? The question is now, how much can you see and what can you do about it? And that's really what the job of the purple team is to automate certain tasks, certain actions, and to make us that much more efficient, that much more effective. And then finally, we have the red team. The red team are the most senior level security professionals in our SOC. They're focusing on offensive security. They're focusing on what are those latest threats out there in the world. There's threats popping up daily. And it is the job of the red team to understand those new threats and then build new rules into our platform so that we can now understand those new threats in our customers' environments. They're also there to respond to incidents. If an incident does occur, the red team would get involved. Anytime a breach occurs, that's when we would engage the red team. The red team is also there for threat hunting. So the red team is extremely versatile. They are our most senior level security engineers. And then above them are the white team, which are the leadership staff. So I want to talk a little bit about our managed XDR solution and sort of our detections and what we're doing on kind of a daily basis. So you can see we analyze over 32,000 threats daily, right? And that being said, we help over 6,500 organizations protect their business. And how we do that is, of course, using our robust threat intelligence and all those other things I spoke about in the previous slide. So as we move on to the next slide, I want to introduce Sage AI. So Sage AI is Barracuda's very own generative AI tool. And how Sage AI is built is it's built on Microsoft's OpenAI and Amazon's Anthropic. And so with that said, it's also built on a hyperscale infrastructure using real cyber data to train the AI model. Along with that, we also have a very robust threat intelligence, which I mentioned before, and it's using that in the model as well, along with our XDR playbooks to ensure the utmost quality and also consistency. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of using AI. Why would we use it? Why is it important? Well, it's important because it provides us a faster time to respond. Like I said at the beginning of this webinar, time is money. The slower the response, the more potential for damage. So it is absolutely critical to respond as fast as possible. And using our automated incident response, we have AI responding for us. We have automation responding for us. So it takes 5 seconds to respond almost in some cases. And another benefit is that it increases the correlation of data. So what we can do is now see what's happening in your firewall. take that data and compare it to your endpoints, and take that data and compare it to your Microsoft 365, your email. And so now we have cross-referencing of data that was otherwise sort of isolated and siloed, because your firewall is a completely different technology than Microsoft 365. But what we do is we take that data together and we compare it, and we're looking for any similarities. We're looking for any patterns. And we can also compare this against historical data. So if we have a threat that occurred or behavior that occurred 6 months ago, we can take that data and we can almost predict what may happen in the future. So it's extremely important to do that cross-referencing of data and referencing historical data. And then, of course, using automation AI, we improve the quality of alerts. We have improved the quality of what we see. And because of that, we're going to reduce alert fatigue. And so alert fatigue, with the quality of the alerts rising, you're less likely to look at an alert and say, okay, well, this is nothing. And then finally, we maintain a 91% true positive rate. That is extremely high in the industry, 91%, so 9% false positive rate. So let's talk about threat investigation, right? And the comparison I want to make here is traditional threat investigation versus investigation with Sage AI. So traditional threat investigation, you might have a cybersecurity engineer that is investigating a threat, investigating an action, and that engineer is probably going to have one window open up for your server, one window open up for your firewall, one window open up for Microsoft 365, another window opened up for your threat intelligence one, could be one database that you're checking, another database that you're checking, maybe 3 databases. So now you have all these windows opened up, you're checking all these different things, and this is a very cumbersome process. This is going to take very long time. It's very difficult to have all these windows open. Now, if we turn to more of the modern approach with Sage AI, using Sage AI, I can enter in what I'm looking for, and I will get a complete output of exactly what I'm looking for without going to all these different logins, all these different websites, and all these different windows. So now we have a complete breakdown of this, for example, this IP address. Where did it come from? What do our databases say about it? Is there any characteristics that we see in other data within your organization? So we streamline this process to make it that much quicker and easier to identify a threat and ultimately respond to that threat. Now, let's talk a little bit about machine learning. So there's a difference between generative AI and machine learning. And machine learning is very data-driven. So with machine learning, as an example, let's run through a scenario here. Let's say we have John Smith, who lives in Los Angeles, signs in from Los Angeles, works in Los Angeles, right? And over the course of 90 days, John Smith has signed in from his Los Angeles location about 130 times. What we've also seen is that John Smith frequently travels to New York. And in New York, he's signed in about 20 times in the last 90 days. They have an office in New York, so he's, let's just say John Smith's an executive and he does a lot of traveling. John Smith also has an office in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and frequents also to Sao Paulo, Brazil in that 90-day sort of time frame, and he's signed in there about 5 times, let's say. So how this works is our solution builds a profile for every user. Every user acts different. Every user signs in from different locations. Every user uses a different device. Every user signs in at different times. And so this is all data that we collect to build that profile. Every 90 days, we update that profile. So what we can conclude here is that this is John Smith's profile: Los Angeles, New York, and Sao Paulo. Now, when there is a sign in from, let's say, Moscow, we can very quickly understand that this is unusual behavior and this does not match John Smith's normal behavior. Number one, it's not signing in from a location that John Smith signed in from before or follows the trend of sign-ins that John Smith has showcased in the last 90 days. Number two, maybe this sign-in does not use the same device that John Smith has usually signed in from before. Number three, the time of day. Maybe John Smith is not signing from the normal times he typically signs in from. And there's many, many other sort of details we analyze to determine if this is an anomalous sign-in. So we use machine learning to build this profile and understand these detections that much quicker. And just to show you the level of detail we provide, here's an example of an alert. So this alert does not pertain to what I just showed you in the last slide. This is from some other example, but you can see we're understanding an anomalous sign-in event. And in here, you can see the original sign-in from Thursday, March 28th, 2024, happened in Holland, the Netherlands. Here is the IP address. Every once in a while, we can pull in the device that's being used, and then we can also see the distance from the normal sign-in behavior, which we've understood here. Using our data, we've calculated the normal sign-in. We've concluded that Santa Clara, California is that normal sign-in location. And because this is so far outside the norm, this is a high risk of being an anomalous sign-in. And then what we also do is we actually do a verification check on that IP address in which this person signed in from. You can see ending in a .27 right here. And we check that IP address. We're looking for any malicious detections. We're looking to see if this IP address is a proxy, if it's used for the dark web, if it's a commercial VPN service. Looks like this one is. It looks like they're using Sweet VPN. We can also see the ISP, the Internet Service Provider, and also the different repositories that we use in our threat intelligence that give us more insight if this is likely a malicious IP address or not. Now, let's get to the fun stuff here. I want to run through a threat simulation, and I want to show you the power of this solution in real time. And so in this simulation, we're going to simulate an impossible travel. And I'm going to walk you through the steps here. So hopefully everyone can see this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sign into our Microsoft account. This is actually me signing in, and we're using our demo account, which is Blue Team. We're going to go ahead and sign in. And where I'm signing in from is New York. So as you can see, I've signed in successfully. This is our demo account. We can access it. There's no problems. So the next thing we're going to do, as you can see, we've signed out. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and connect to our VPN service. So we're going to emulate us traveling across the world. So we're going to connect to Japan, specifically Tokyo. So we're going to click on Tokyo. You can see we are connected. And then we're going to go back into our Microsoft account and sign back in. So we've just signed in from New York. About a minute later, we're going to sign in from Tokyo. We'll go ahead and enter in our credentials. And as you can see, we can get into our account. Now, it's interesting to note that we are not performing any actions. There are no actions happening because people use VPN services all the time. But what we will do is we're going to look at the big picture of things. What else is occurring in this environment? What are the patterns? And so the next thing I'm going to do as an attacker is not only have I just compromised the account, but I'm also creating a forwarding rule. This is a very common tactic for attackers. First thing they do is they'll analyze the emails, they'll create a forwarding rule, typically. And so the forwarding rule is going to be anything in the subject field that includes invoice, payment, or bank. We're going to forward those emails over to our hacker123@gmail.com address. And then what we're also going to do is we're going to take those emails that we've just forwarded and we're going to move them into a folder. In the folder, we're going to actually create a new folder in here. We're going to call it junk. So we're going to save this. Now these emails will be forwarded over to the junk folder so the victim doesn't suspect anything. And we saved it. Now, once we save it, we see, the screen kind of flickers and refreshes and the account is immediately locked down. So what happened here is the account had been signed out of every active session. That means if this account had an active session on a phone, on an iPad, on a computer, on a laptop, every session would be terminated. And then the Microsoft account is disabled. So as you can see in our XDR platform, we have 3 alerts. The first alert right here in the middle is the impossible travel. The second alert is the suspicious inbox rule. And then the third alert is the notification of the action that was taken immediately due to the prior activity that occurred. So as you can see, in a matter of a few seconds, we're able to block this attack from progressing further. This can make or break a business, being able to respond that much quicker. Think about something like this occurring on Christmas morning when people are least likely to work, on any holiday, in the early morning hours, 3, 4 in the morning. Because guess what? Attackers are awake. The attackers are typically coming from Russia, coming from overseas. And at that time, they're awake, but we're not. And that's when they're most likely to attack. And so having a solution like this, having a service like this, being able to act immediately, again, this can make or break a business. So now we talked about Microsoft 365. We talked about email. Let's kind of switch gears here. Let's talk about endpoint protection. So in this success story from our SOC case files, I'm going to show you how quickly we were able to identify a threat with our endpoint protection and quarantine that threat. So this attack originally began with an external drive connecting to an endpoint. So how that external drive came to be in the business, I have no idea. A threat actor could have mailed the external drive, could be a USB little thumb drive, could have mailed that thumb drive to the business, could have dropped it off in the business. Someone could have just dropped it in front of the building. And based on just human nature and human curiosity, people typically will pick up that drive, connect it to their computer, and, oh, let's see what's on this. Let's see if this is anyone's in the office. And so it's very common for something like that to occur, and that's typically or highly likely of what might have occurred in this scenario. So it all started with a USB drive. Person connected the drive to their computer, and 11 seconds into that drive being connected to the computer, we saw a presence of a tool called SharpUp. SharpUp is used for privilege escalation, and our service, our XDR service, was able to detect and mitigate this software from running. Followed by that, now total 17 seconds into the attack, so about 6 seconds later, we saw the presence of a Mimikatz tool. Mimikatz is a very common attack tool that a lot of attackers like to use, and it's used for data theft, lateral movement, and it was also detected and mitigated. Now, a total of 66 seconds into the attack, our start custom rules were triggered, and we disconnected the device, the endpoint, from the network. And so nothing can come in contact. However, attacks are still running from that USB drive. So we saw 2 more pieces of software. I don't really know how to pronounce the first one. I'm going to call it lasagna. And we saw the lasagna tool get executed for password stealing, and that was detected and mitigated. And then also a Thor APT scanner, which is used for discovery and scanning your network. This was also detected and mitigated. And ultimately, the infected endpoint was disconnected from the network, like I said earlier, but then any files or anything that was altered, that was reverted back to a last known good configuration automatically. All of this occurred without the end user's knowledge. All of this occurred in kind of the background. So the end user connected the USB device. The end user didn't realize anything was happening in the background because in their visual, they see nothing opening up. They see nothing happening. That's how quick we're able to identify this attack. Now, one thing I always like to point out is USB device control is something our Security Operations Center recommends turning on at all times. That is a feature we can turn on with our endpoint protection. And what that essentially does is it blocks all USB devices from being, USB mass storage devices from being connected to your machine. And of course, we can make some exclusions and we can whitelist specific devices. But as a best practice standard, we highly suggest turning that on. And guess what this organization did after this attack? They turned that on. So this is another success story from our technology here of how we can protect your endpoints, not just your cloud environments. So we talked about a lot of different things today, and I want to sort of leave you with a few key takeaways, some really good things to kind of question yourself or ask your internal IT staff. And that is, what is your risk tolerance? How much risk can you tolerate, right? How much potential threat or potential damage can you tolerate? What is your RPO and RTO? What is your recovery point objective in the event of a disaster? How far back can you restore the affected files? And then the recovery time objective. In the event of a disaster, how long does it take for you to perform this recovery? Those are 2 very important acronyms to understand and really find the answer to. So if you are in the midst of a disaster, again, a fire, a flood, a cyber incident, is it going to take you 6 months to restore and recover from a threat or a disaster, or is it going to take you 2 hours? That's a huge gap. So it's very important to understand those 2 points there. Another point here I want to make is, how do you respond to events after hours, weekends, holidays? Back to what I alluded to earlier, most of these attacks occur off hours. And if I were to ask my SOC team, where do we see most of the attacks occurring? They're going to say after hours, holidays, weekends, when people are least likely to be in front of a machine. What regulatory compliance, insurance, or legal obligations must be met? So the industry is changing. There's regulatory standards being enforced. There's state standards. There's local standards. There's insurance standards. There's standards pertaining to your specific vertical. So what are these standards that need to be met, and does our managed XDR solution fulfill that? And do you feel that you're adequately staffed? This is a big one. Again, alluding to what I said earlier with the talent shortage. Are you a one-man shop? Are you doing everything yourself? Are you getting on the verge of being burnt out? Obviously, the threat actors are targeting those folks, the one-man shops, the two-man shops, the low resource organizations. And do you feel, the question is, do you feel that you can handle a threat? You can handle an attack? And again, all of this stuff Data Link can really help with all of this stuff by bolstering on a SOC onto your team, on your existing team. Very, very well qualified technical folks, and really help answering all these other questions and preparing you in the event of a disaster. You never want to prepare during a disaster. You want to be well prepared before it. So for those in attendance today, you'll get 2 complimentary ebooks, one outlining top email threats and trends, and then the other discussing XDR and why it's the modern approach to threat management. In addition to this, you'll get a Stories from the SOC handbook that's going to outline some of the things I spoke about here. I talked about some examples of how we were able to mitigate threats. This is going to go through real-world scenarios that we've uncovered with our managed XDR solution. That's going to talk about a bunch of different verticals, a bunch of different industries, and what we're seeing today. And before we go, I want to open up the floor for any questions. So I'll pass it to you, Amanda. I'm not sure if you can see any questions there in the Q&A section.
Thanks, Benny. Yeah, we've had a couple questions come in, so I'm going to read the first one off to you. So the first question is, how quickly can you respond to a cyber incident?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, time is of the essence. Time is money, right? So the quicker you respond, the more likely you are able to quarantine and get that threat completely out of your environment. So we're able to respond automatically anywhere from 5 seconds to 30 seconds. So it could be as quick as that for more complex threats. It could be a little longer, it could be a few minutes. But again, having a solution in place that can respond within seconds and minutes is very much different than waiting until next business day to respond because you were sleeping at night and it was something that happened in the middle of the night. So to answer that question, we can respond within seconds and minutes.
Amazing. Second question is, what cybersecurity measures should be in place for a small office with about 20 computers or under without an IT expert or a fancy network?
Yeah, this is a common question that comes up is, hey, I'm not, I've never been attacked before. No one's going to attack me. I'm just a small mom and pop shop, or I'm a small business. I don't have a lot of money. I don't have a lot of stuff. And it really, to answer the question, it really doesn't matter how big or how small you are. I think every organization, if it is your main source of income, you have to protect yourself. So there could be a number of different things that we can go over. It's, what firewall do you have? What endpoint protection do you have? What spam filter do you have? What monitoring solution do you have? Are you fully patched? What do your backups look like? These are all questions that the team at Data Link can help you answer. They can come to your facility on site. They can do a network assessment. You might think that you don't have a complex network or a complex business, but again, if you're gaining income from that business to feed you and your family, it's important to protect that business, whether small or large.
And it looks like we've got one more question. What's your biggest concern about the future of cybersecurity?
Yeah, this is a great sort of open-ended question to end things here. I think with the rise of AI, things are going to get worse. Luckily, we are also using AI for good, as you kind of saw in the presentation a little bit earlier. So as AI kind of progresses and advances, you can only assume that the attacks are going to be that much more advanced, that much more difficult. So things are going to get much worse before they get better. But luckily, we have organizations like ourselves, Barracuda, which stay on top of these trends. We're following these trends, we're maintaining this, and we're altering our solutions so that we can fight AI with AI. So really, it's just going to get worse at this point. So.
Yeah.
All right. So since that was the last question, Amanda, I'll pass it to you to talk about next steps.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Benny. So we'd love to continue the conversation with each and every one of you. So please reach out to a Data Link representative to schedule a free consultation. You can also scan the QR code here on this slide to contact us or directly book a meeting on our website. We are offering a free email threat scan and network vulnerability scan for all attendees today. So you definitely don't want to miss out on that. Also, please be sure to follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated on all of our upcoming events and promotions. We appreciate your time today, and we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.